It's early on a hot morning at your peri-urban mixed practice. It's a day like any other. You diligently check the emergency alerts and warnings, and bomb, the fire warning is high. Your nurse recently SMSed the clients to get ready for bushfire season and updated your social media. The team also met 3 weeks ago with surrounding vet hospitals, the big vet emergency hospital, local government, emergency services to update your emergency plan. The kits, vehicles, and floats are ready and paddocks are prepped. You're halfway through a consult of your fully booked day and there's a knock on the door. It's your new tech and he says, "It's smoky outside, there's ash on the cars." The other tech runs in. They've checked the alerts and warnings. There's a bushfire. The clinic is in the watch and act zone. You all know that this is the agreed trigger to evacuate. You exit the room. People look stressed and are running around. Your client looks bewildered. The phones start ringing. There's sirens in the distance. It doesn't look good out there. You have a million thoughts at once, but then your training kicks in. You focus on your breathing and go straight to the printed plan. You activate the emergency response and assume control, placing your vest on, advising you are now the veterinary emergency coordinator. You're activating the plan. You provide evacuation orders to the team and orders to contact the other vet hospitals. The team are clear on their roles and responsibilities. They have trained for this. The surgery team, still doing surgery, are advised to finish. Waiting patients are triaged and are either sent home or to a prearranged hospital. Internal fences of the practice paddock are opened. The phone goes on hold. The message is changed, and clients pick up their sedated animals that were awaiting surgery. The staff are activating their own home plans. Those that need to go, go. Staff that choose to stay call their families to help at home. Your level of preparedness is about to pay off, but it's in ways that you couldn't have anticipated. The bushfire ends up doing damage. The practice is partially damaged, but you and the community do recover. You have resilience, but it's only because of the preparedness that you and the community collectively took. And that's really one scenario of many in animal emergency management. And so today, in the amazing hour that we've got, we're going to talk about veterinary emergency planning and a little bit of background around animal emergency management. So we'll talk about how we've got to be where we are now, a little around the emergency management framework so that we know what we need to do when the event happens. And then we'll go through three specific areas of the plan. And as Claire said, you've got time at the end to ask questions. And if you're watching this online because it's recorded, please send your questions in to the organisation. So, as you know, climate change and disasters, there's a very strong link. In fact, we no longer call disasters natural at all. You'll still see the terminology around, but really we just refer to them as disasters now because of the impact that humans have made on the environment. So we know that there's the increasing severity and frequency, but it's also the impact of disasters that's occurring in greater proportions as well. We're now seeing disasters we've never seen before and needing new strategies that we've never needed previously. So we used to say if it happens, but now we say whether you're in the city or the country, it's really when it's going to happen. So many animals, guardians, owners, and anyone who likes animals are going to be impacted and affected. And when we plan, we place animals into the following groups because of the species specific focus that we have. So, wildlife, livestock, horses, companion animals, working, zoo, lab, feral, and even marine species as well. So, of course, as you can appreciate, this is going to change and it's going to depend on the jurisdiction that you're in, the laws, the context, and also the local culture of that place. So in Australia, out of those groups, which animals can we expect to be the most impacted? This is going to help us with our demographics and getting ready. So generally at the moment, wildlife and livestock followed by horses and then companion animals are impacted. But really this changes because it depends on the type of disaster that we're seeing, the severity of that disaster, the geographic location, so whether it's the city or the country, and then the population of people and animals and the species there, and also the preparedness of those communities. And so there's quite a few factors, and this is why it's a shared responsibility for us as well in veterinary practice. The approaches that we use are a one health and one welfare approach. And we know because animals and humans are inextricably linked, if we impact one group, we will naturally impact the other, be it physical, mental, emotional, or otherwise. So, whilst historically, and quite rightly so, emergency services have and will continue to prioritise the care of humans in disasters and emergencies, we're now saying, look, as we grow and as we change and start to establish veterinary emergency response teams and animal response teams, let us help you with those responses. You've got expertise with humans, we need your help, and it's the same for them as well. And so this helps with resources, which is a key problem for us in disasters. Everything is contextualized care. So it benefits everybody. And now, rather than just saying the one health and one welfare approach, I float the term one emergency management to include everybody and the key approaches that we discuss. So, although animal emergency management is relatively new in Australia and New Zealand, it's only had academic research for about the past 15 years. We're now focusing on these practical elements. And so, this is going to help us immensely as we grow and start to develop plans and experience these emergencies and give feedback about them. So, the human animal bond, as you know, preaching to the converted in this group, we have a range of connections, don't we? And so it's really important that we have that local knowledge in that plan because you're able to speak to what those people and animals will need. It's documented and demonstrated that people will risk their lives to save animals, even if they're not their guardian, even if it's a horse they've never met before. And it's also documented that animals will risk their lives to save humans too. So we can see that close connection. There's also this increased societal expectation for animals to be cared for by veterinary personnel, and that's only been elevated since the pandemic and during the pandemic, where we were realised and registered as essential services in terms of personnel working in those kinds of environments. And so people come to us as experts, they expect that we will be able to help them. And so it's our duty to also be prepared. And there's multiple reasons for that as well. It's also because we need to have resilience and sustainability as an industry and within our teams as well. So before we get into what kinds of scenarios we might be seeing, let's discuss the terminology because you're going to hear me and others in emergency management refer to emergencies and also disasters. So when we talk about an emergency, essentially what we're saying is that from level 1 to 3, be it a small house fire or be it a big bushfire, this is an emergency. It's an incident that we're experiencing which began with a hazard. An emergency can also refer to a disaster, so it can also include big events like tsunamis, for example. But when we use the term disaster, we are specifically referring to an emergency declaration. And what we're saying is this community that has been impacted is so overwhelmed that there's no way it's going to be able to respond or recover on its own. And so this is automatically state level resources at this point. And it releases more resources once it's declared, and that's under the Emergency Management Act of that state or territory. And then from there, we get these national resources and sometimes international as well. So if we're starting to plan and we're thinking about what is it that our veterinary hospital might like to do, or what is it that we don't want to do, perhaps we've decided that we're going to have a minor role, that's okay as well. Here's some of the scenarios that we may encounter. So we may have animals coming to us in the hospital. We may have teams that respond out in the field. So, like the South Australian veterinary emergency management model, they have a triage and a treatment tent. They go out into the field. Or we might see something similar to the Massey Veterinary Emergency Response Team in New Zealand or the University of Florida veterinary team, where they're going out into the field. And with the UF vets in Florida, they've actually got this amazing mobile veterinary unit. It's a truck, and it's got everything contained in there. We also see that with the New Zealand horse ambulance as well. The other scenario is that we may be assisting our colleagues at another hospital or another animal facility, and that's happening more and more, particularly with other organisations working with us and helping, such as Vets Beyond Borders. So, an important thing to think about is our veterinary industry as a microcosm, and that we're working within a system, and that the macrocosm around us is really important to understand. We're going to be working in an emergency management framework, for example, when these incidents occur. And so we'll go a little bit into that emergency framework in just a moment. And so thinking about how everything impacts everything else gives us a really good understanding of what's happening around us and also what can happen locally as well. So the key here is that planning and practicing in peacetime help organisations and individuals to be prepared. If our team members aren't prepared, then that will impact us greatly, and also vice versa. It also increases that stress. And that can reduce our resistance and our sustainability, of course, as well. So preparedness builds that community resilience, and it is a shared responsibility. There's no way that our emergency services can come to every single veterinary clinic and every single house. It's just not possible. They are trying to help to contain and control that emergency that's happening. And so we need to play our part as well. And I know that you recognize that, which is amazing. So the key point for this slide is the resilience factor, and that's that ability, as you know, to bounce back and return to a new normal after the emergency. So let's go into this framework that we've been discussing in that wider system that we're working. So majority of the planning does happen at the state and territory level in Australia. The only one animal plan that we have is at the national level for biosecurity. And at that state level, what we're seeing is generally they're called animal welfare emergency plans. And this caters to a variety of natural hazard type disasters. So if I give you an example using Western Australia, which is where I'm situated, so we have a hazard management agency called Department of Fire and Emergency Services. In an emergency, they command and control and have a legislative responsibility for that particular hazard. So should a bushfire, this will be the example for today. So should a bushfire occur, what will happen is DPIRD or DPI, which would be the cousin, if you like, over east. DPIRD will enact their state animal welfare emergency plan with the permission and at the request of Department of Fire and Emergency Services. So we have a hazard management agency up the top, then we have a support agency underneath. And so we could be working at the local level, or if we decide to join a community veterinary response, it could be at a district level where there's district planning. Or it could even be a state level if you have those arrangements in place with your support agency. So that's generally how it rolls. And it's important to note as well that not every state and territory has planning at all levels, and that's all those three levels. So most local levels will have plans. The district is the area that's the biggest gap at the moment, and then some states and territories still need to plan at that level as well. So when we're planning, we're looking at an all hazard approach. And you might say, well, I live in Central Australia. Do I really need to be worried about a tsunami? And thank gosh, no, you don't. But we do need to focus in on our key risks, and then we have a section of our plan that has general contingencies, and that's what you'll use for those unexpected ones that are going to come up. If you're close to the ocean, though, please do factor in storm surge and tsunami as one of your potential hazards, particularly as sometimes we can see these compound emergencies and disasters where we have one type of emergency and then we have another one following it. Or, for example, you have a tsunami and then you also have a flood as well. So it is important to understand that context there, and emergency services personnel, if you meet with them, can certainly help you with that. So this is the controversial point, which is why I did the natural hazards before. They are natural hazards, but as I said, we don't really refer in an academic sense to disasters as natural anymore. And this has come from the work of the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Group. And so they've created, from a global perspective, the Sendai framework, which is the overarching guide, if you like. It's a framework to help us with our emergency response. And so the terminology is starting to change, but for the moment, you'll see natural disasters used everywhere because it's in legislation and plans and policy as well. We always plan for the worst case, and some of the trouble at the moment is actually understanding what the worst case might be, because we're having the worst of the worst, worse than we could expect and anticipate. So this is where artificial intelligence can assist us, and models as we move forward as well. So certainly taking an innovative approach there. So the big key point here, other than the all hazards approach, is that we work within that response, and the hazard management agency and the support agency are always going to be guiding us in terms of what we can and can't do, and that's for our own safety. If you're having a very small local level response just at that hospital and you're seeing a few animals coming through, then that's to a lesser extent. You won't be involved as much in the incident command system, but certainly when you are working with the other groups externally to the hospital, there is that incident command system and a certain chain of command and reporting line there. So, what about veterinary emergency planning? What is it that you need to think about? So, the general sections of a plan, first we start with the background. We want to explain to people what the purpose is and why we're actually doing this. Why is this important to us where we live in our community? And what's the reason that we're actually going to be getting ready here? Then the management can decide on the scope. Of course, this can be a discussion amongst the team, but it has to because the managers are going to need to fund it. The managers will decide on how big that scope should be, what you do, what you don't do. Even if you decide you don't do something, you're still going to put it in your plan and talk about what those contingencies are. Then we discuss the roles and responsibilities so that every single person, every single position within that roster that day knows exactly what they're going to be doing. And that plays a huge role when they're activated, just like you saw at the beginning of this talk. And then from there, we use the RRR approach. So this is being ready. So this is the first part of the plan. And in there, we put prevention and preparedness. Then we look at response or responding as the second section, and then recovery as the third. So following that, we usually have some appendices. And these are last but certainly not least, because we want to include our contact list there and anything that's confidential information for the management version of this plan as well. So it could be pins, that you log in for certain insurance and so on and so forth, whatever you need there. So the plan has to address, as we said, what you will and won't do. And this really works well when you meet with local stakeholders because local government, for example, they'll have their local animal welfare emergency plan if they're really well prepared, and many of them are doing this at the moment. Um, and you don't want them to assume that you can do something that you can't, and vice versa as well. And so it's probably a pertinent point in time to tell you that normally we rely on our rangers for so much with cats and dogs, and they do look after those acts, at least in WA. And when those emergencies happen, say it's a bushfire, those rangers, the local rangers, often have a bushfire responsibility. And so in WA, at least, what we're doing at the moment is looking at how we can get councils to work together to help us with that support and those displaced animals and all those things that we need, because we recognise that that local council may be just so busy responding and trying to keep themselves afloat, as all emergency services are. So there's two key documents that I would really like you to refer to when you're planning. So pretty exciting. The Australian Institute of Disaster Resilience has just created with a bunch of us the Planning for Animals in Disaster Handbook, and that's going to be released any day now, sometime this year. So do go and have a look on the AIDR website for that. And the other one we created back in 2012, but it's still got a stack of great info in there for you. That's the National Planning Principles for Animals, and you can download that from the Australian Veterinary Association website. So you would use the two in conjunction, and I'm very happy as well to supply you with whatever templates you need. So if you are sold on emergency management for animals, and I hope you are, you must be because you're here. What about the other stakeholders? Because this is a bit of change management, isn't it? So what if you've got to convince your boss? Your boss isn't sure, and also they've got a lot going on because the vet industry, as we know, is in chaos at the moment. So if you can prepare a blurb, some of the things that you may want to put forward when you're talking about this. Essentially, the key point is that it's going to help us with our practices, resilience, and sustainability. So it's going to ensure that we can keep our team members and help us to respond should anything happen. And you don't need to use these plans for just the big disasters. You can use it for any business continuity at all. So the other thing as well is when you're planning and you're going through this process, the exciting thing about this is that you can actually learn skill sets that you can use every day. And so what do I mean by that? So for example, in emergency training, we will train you and we will say, you must look after yourself first, then the team, and then the patient, which is kind of backwards as to how many of us do it in practice. But the whole point there is that in an emergency environment, if we don't have you well and fit, we may need to pull the whole entire team, and it may also stop us from responding to other emergencies. And so it really is that utilitarian for the good of everybody. And so that keeps that sustainability part going. And boosting that resilience, as we said, mitigating veterinary shortages, and the debriefing that we do during emergencies as well. And I would love to see veterinary practices doing this every day. Get in contact if you want to know how to. Very happy to help you there. Um, the debriefing that we do in emergencies and the practice that you do, you can use every single day at work. You don't need to just be an ECC department or a secondary level hospital or a tertiary hospital. You can do it in primary care and general practice, no problems at all. It will help you. It finds the gaps, it helps the team, the cohesion, it helps your culture. It does so many things. But most importantly, from a business and an executive's point of view, it's business continuity, as we mentioned, and it supports that overarching business strategy, the whole purpose of why we're there, why the business functions, and that triple bottom line that we're looking for. So the people first, the environment, and the social elements as well, and of course the financial aspects that management's interested in. So the environmental social governance point there, Vets for Climate Action, I've already introduced this part, but I will give them an extra plug here because I think the model is brilliant and it's something that we need to be working towards for our triple bottom line in practice. And it will also help us to attract the right people to our workplaces in terms of a values match. So those that really care about sustainability, of course. So we're starting to look at our planning, but before we get into it, before we start writing, let's actually identify our stakeholders because this is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. I'm not going to go through the whole list here, but I will focus in on three parties. So firstly, our team. Yes, our management team will decide the eventual scope of the response and what we'll do. But also let's include everyone because nobody knows how to do their job better than the person that does it every single day. And we need that diversity and that intelligence in the group, the different intelligences in terms of their specializations and the skill sets of what they do every day. So all levels of employee, get them all involved. Now, if you've got a really big practice, you may need to run a survey to do that, but that's another story for another time. The second group are our clients. And so, particularly looking at vulnerable communities, because these are the groups that are going to need more assistance and they're going to depend and lean on you more. Now, that's okay. That's what we're there for. But also, if we can help them to prepare, for example, maybe someone has a crate that they give us and we can give them a free crate, which means they can evacuate with their cat or their small dog, those kinds of situations. So, you know your demographics and your local population. And if you can help them, that will certainly help your traffic on the day, but most importantly, help people and the animals and the resilience. So the last group that I want to talk about, and just feel welcome to freeze the screen at any point later on if you want to write them all down. But the last group, and this is pretty exciting. So I completely acknowledge the amazing work that Dr. Lissy has done at the Social Hearted Vet there on the East Coast. She does quite a bit of veterinary social work already, but we've got a new venture here. And so Veterinary and Community Care, based here in WA, have just recently got a $285,000 grant from the WA government. Pretty exciting to create the veterinary social worker training program. So our vet social workers can assist us greatly, not just in everyday practice, but also disasters. They have unique skill sets around access for clients to the vet, financial referral, counselling referral. They can help us with emotional debriefing for our vet teams. They're trained to talk to our clients if they're waiting a long time in emergency because lots of things are going on. There's so many things that they can do, including grief counselling for clients. And so we're really looking forward to that. So stay tuned and do go onto the website there. And that originally came from the University of Tennessee. So the first section of our plan, the big one, readiness. So here we're thinking about prevention, and you might say, and you'd be right to ask, how can I prevent a disaster? Well, if we think about biosecurity, it's probably going to be one person or one team that notices that there's a potentially infectious disease about to occur. But if we're thinking about all of the other types of disasters, we first want to start with our carbon emissions and those greenhouse gases. So thinking about that systems approach and how we don't want to contribute to the very disasters that we're actually trying to mitigate in the first instance. So it's all that prevention work that we do every single day at work, recycling, and then I'll let the other experts like VFCA talk about the rest. But when we think about the preventative steps, the good news is that many of the emergencies that we see, they're going to be seasonal. So we know that we're going to see fires generally September to April. Up north, that's going to be extended on both sides of the country and across the centre top. The storms can be all year, but we know we're going to see those tropical cyclones in North Queensland, north of WA, Northern Territory, November to April. So you've kind of got a bit of a schedule there that you can have a look at and put it in your calendar and get ready. So many of these steps are the same. So if I give you the bushfire example, a prevention situation there, when we have a bushfire, in the really big ones, those ember attacks can travel kilometers ahead of the fire front. And so often what happens is we get the spot fires, as you know, and if you've got a lot of fuel on the ground, such as leaf litter and volatile plants like eucalyptus, they can catch light quite quickly. And so then what we get is all these little spot fires, and it can be difficult, as I said, for emergency services to be everywhere, although they will set up strike teams for that. It's on their radar. But sometimes those spot fires join together, and then we've got multiple fire fronts happening. So if we individually at our veterinary properties and at home prepare and clear all of that leaf litter, make sure that we've got our gutters clear, ensure that our paddocks are set up really well and that everything's, we've got fire breaks in place if we're in the rural area, then we can see how that could potentially either A, prevent a fire from starting in that area or other damage such as flooding, or prevent further damage from happening more than what it was going to already. So just mitigate it and reduce it a little bit. So the biosecurity, important for us in the city as well as the country. People do travel, as you know, between all those areas. So I'll show you a book in a minute that you can download to help you with that. So let's look, continuing at this ready section, around preparation. So there is a bit of a list there, and I'm just going to touch base on the key points. So firstly, identifying those key risks as we spoke about. So if you're in New South Wales, for example, your key risks are going to be fire and flood. If you're up north in WA, your key risks are going to be fire, flood, and also cyclones and potentially tornadoes as well. Then we want to think about our capacity. So what have we got the space to do? And then capability, what is it that we can actually do? And it's all right if you can't, if you decide not to do much at all, that's totally fine. Those roles and responsibilities, make them really clear. And then let's get to the big bugbear of every single emergency, no matter how experienced you are at them, the communications. So let's pretend that we are lucky enough to have the internet working and phones working. So let's get ready. Let's get some templates happening there. And in our preparation phase, we would create a phone message. Maybe we can even pre-record it. And it would say something like this to our clients. Thank you for calling us. We are currently responding to the emergency. If your patients are currently staying with us, we are looking after them and we will call you very soon. If you have an emergency, please go to so-and-so veterinary hospital. If you have a non-urgent issue, please go to so-and-so vet practices. Automatically, you've said to them, we're handling this, and it gives you a chance to turn the phones off. I know it doesn't feel normal and natural because we are just glued to those phones, but turn those phones off and get yourselves organized so that you can handle what you've got and what's about to come in. Give yourself that time. It's not going to stop all the traffic, but it's certainly going to slow that traffic that's coming down to your veterinary hospital. So let's say that there were problems with our comms. How would we communicate with other veterinary hospitals and we need to refer these cases? How would we communicate with them if our phone systems go down? And so radios are one option, but perhaps you just want to go straight to SMS because that's much easier than trying to get through with a verbal phone call. So something to think about. If everything's gone in terms of communications, we have to be self-sufficient and be able to have those downtime procedures ready to go. So if there's no electricity and no other utilities, If you need to euthanize, we've got to obviously look after our legal responsibilities as well as the ethics of the animals and the people, have those forms there ready to sign and already printed, ready to go. We want to think about our admin, finance. Have we got the money? Have we got the insurance set the right way that we need it? Can we pay staff for extra hours if we need it, or if new people come and join our team? And most importantly, the welfare of our people as well. So, welfare and emergency management means food and water and care. And so, looking at that counselling as well and having proactive contingencies and vet social workers in time. The professionals don't work more than 12 hours per day. And so these emergencies are going to go on for some time. And so we've really got to think early on before it actually happens. How would we run this? And this is why the triggers for when we're starting to get full and we need to stop taking cases and stop taking phone calls is really, really important. The logistics, where is everything that we need? Is it in a sound environment? Is it in good integrity? Can we use it if we need it? And that will also include your vehicles and your floats if you've got a mixed animal practice. Don't get caught shy of having all of the accounts that you need there. I've found myself before looking for the keys for the oxygen shed when it's misbehaving and oxygen gas something is pluming out the top. We sorted it out, not a worry there. But yes, really important to have spares of everything because sometimes things get misplaced or people pick it up and take it somewhere and put it somewhere else. So just be prepared with that and have that management version of the plan as you need. Now, the amazing news for us across Australia is that we've got the same warning systems now. So if you're traveling and if people are traveling to you, wherever you go, we're all the same for all those types of hazards that you see listed there. But I invite you now, in terms of sourcing information and the way that we think about disasters and emergencies, to start to think a little bit differently if you're not doing this already. So, to grow situational awareness, can I invite you over the next couple of days just to practice this as a skill set? So, pretend you're going to the airport or anywhere that you go, it can be any facility, even the shopping centre. Prepare you're going, Pretend you're going to the airport and prepare yourself when you walk in. Look at all of the exits. Notice the evacuation plan as you go in. Can you see any defibrillators? Where are the phones? What are the people doing? What's the environment like? And then I want you to switch off and really enjoy your day. Don't stay with it for too long. But that kind of thinking gets you ready to respond. Your brain has already stored that somewhere. And should an emergency happen, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, and this includes at work, you're ready to respond to those scenarios. So that's actually come from The Unthinkable, which was an amazing book that's written by Amanda Ripley. She's an investigative journalist. It's an oldie but a goodie, and I would love for you to read it if you got the time at some point. So that situational awareness, let's grow it where we can. We saw at the start that we looked at alerts and warnings and ensuring that we know what's happening, and that includes the Bureau of Meteorology. So be aware and then switch off and go about your day. Check in as needed. If you're on a very, very high level warning, then of course you may need to evacuate early or make some decisions there. But you've got time to figure that out when you're planning. Do make sure that you know what your limits are as an individual, as a team, and also as a community, because that's going to help to guide you. And you do not need to be a hero. You're already a hero every day anyway. Just pay attention to that and be respectful for that for sure, because you already do enough. So if we're thinking about really preparing well, then the preparation, the ready section of our plan also talks about how often we practice the plan that we've written. And that helps to get those synaptic pathways and those neural networks working the way that we need them to, so that we can have that action kick in rather than getting stressed, because we do have limited cognition at the start at least, whilst we're responding to it. And by the way, let's digress for 2 seconds. This is the emergency animal disease booklet that I was just mentioning before, and you can download that from DAF. So ideally, you'd print that and put that with your emergency plan and in your vehicles. So check your plan annually, replenish those kits, particularly if you've got drugs in there and Schedule 8s. You'll of course have to figure out how you do that. Perhaps you do just leave them in the safe and then grab them when you need them. I can appreciate that. Also, there's legalities there. But socialize any of those changes with the plan and with your procedures with that team. And especially when people are coming on new, make it a part of your induction. Make your induction so good that they are really ready for whatever happens to them, not just during emergencies, but during peacetime as well. Have the templates ready to go. It will help you immensely. Have some talking points for the triage and receptionist nurses. And again, making sure everyone knows exactly what they're doing on the day because it's going to make the job and the situation move much more fluently and effectively. Regular seasonal community engagement is incredibly important. Nobody understands veterinary medicine the way that you do. And so we need to be working with our community that we also know really well to get them ready and to work with those stakeholders as well. Make sure everyone's on the same page. So, for our veterinary emergency response teams, there's a list of role titles there that you may want to consider. The first thing I really want you to think about here is that perhaps it's not the vet or the nurse that's going to be managing that scenario. Perhaps it's actually the practice manager who has a non-veterinary role because we are going to be shy of resources and we're going to need to use contextualized care, the holistic approach to animal medicine in those environments. And so have a think about it. The only other thing I would suggest here is to not use the title officer because we have an incident command system. And should you be working in that incident command system externally to the practice, we don't want to confuse anybody. We've got to be really careful with that. So moving from the ready phase of our plan into response. And so we've already started to set ourselves up here. We've probably already thought about some of the things that we can do. But one of the areas that we'll need to discuss is those triggers in our stages of activation. So when will we be on alert? When will we stand by, like getting ready for the actual event? It could potentially happen. Really careful with your discussion with staff around this so that they don't get that fatigue element around it, particularly if you're regularly put on standby. We see that happen in SES sometimes in the state emergency service. You know, you get these calls all the time where you're about to go out and then you have to stand down, but it's important to discuss that with them. So know all of those stages. When will you stand? When will you activate the plan? And at what stages do you need to obviously start to stand down as well? Because you are human, we do need you to have a break. We need you for the long term. Locations, where can everyone find things? Where's that equipment cache, the personal protective equipment, so on and so forth. And as you always do, factor in that species specific handling, the fear free, the stress less, really good animal welfare science approaches. If you're thinking about what you want to do as a practice, here are some areas that you may want to consider. So you may choose to not respond at all and divert all of the cases elsewhere that are coming in from disasters, or you could consider training and starting to look after animal search and rescue. Disaster triage. Do note that it's different to emergency and critical care triage. So it's really a war triage approach. So we go from the normal regular 6 or 5 levels that we have down to probably a 3 level is even better, 3 or 4. And it's really a utilitarian approach. So we're trying to save the biggest amount of animals as we possibly can. So with an example, if we had a group of animals and they needed immediate treatment or they would die, but we choose to spend our time on a resuscitation instead, you could see that we were resource shy, we would lose all of those other animals. And so really difficult decisions need to be made, but we're trying to save as many animals as we can. And so we would choose probably to not resuscitate in that instance. So that's how it's quite different to ECC. Emergency critical care staff are probably better placed to naturally step into these roles, but it doesn't mean that the rest can't train either. So these are all, they're not innate skills, they're things you can learn. And that's just that growth mindset and really good training programs, which we are developing. So again, state what you will and what you won't do. There's nothing worse than saying, well, we don't do large animal emergency rescue, but I'm not sure who does. It increases the stress for everybody. So talk about who that is and a little bit of controversial suggestion, particularly in WA. But if you don't have anybody, then talk about this to the emergency services, or it will be for any emergency call 000. We can talk about more why that's controversial at another time. So write in everything. Make sure it's really clear. So unlike the ready part of the plan, where you've probably got a few paragraphs of information written, The response section's completely different. It needs to be really simple. So the first page of your plan needs to clearly state where that response section is. Go to page 15. We go to page 15 and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 very straight, clear points so that when people are stressed, they can read it really quickly and understand what it says. So really simple, very concise language. And then you'll have appendices at the back to help for any extra information that they need. And it's socialized before that as well, so they should ideally know. But the idea is that anyone can pick up that plan and run with it should they need to. For the communications, do follow the hazard management agency's lead. Uh, Utilize the official alerts and warnings page as the source of truth. So rather than trying to replicate the messages or keep up with any of them like that and posting them, just send them straight to that area. So for example, in WA, that's Emergency WA. If the hazard management agency has talked about it, then it's okay for you to talk about it, but you understand confidentiality perfectly. It's confidential until then, and you may have inside information that you can't share just yet. So the areas that we can consider in terms of the functional areas, I would suggest that, and you probably have these already, but decontamination and quarantine kits. And when you set up your response areas, you may actually choose to create these stations. So they come in for triage, decontamination, quarantine, or to the particular triage treatment station from there. Perhaps you even just have one station for analgesia and fluids, for example. So set it up as you need to, and this will change over time as well. Animals that have been in floods are nearly always going to need decontamination. I do that as best practice. So E. coli, salmonella, they've probably been in sewage. They may have been around trigger warning deceased bodies. So definitely wear your PPE and decontaminate. With respect to quarantine, as you would normally, and then if you are concerned about any infectious diseases, then err on the side of caution and, of course, communicate with DAF as needed. And that's in that booklet that we shared just now. In terms of treatment, make sure that we've got a really good knowledge, skills, and abilities alignment with the task that people are doing. And so we want our amazing veterinarians to be diagnosing, and we want our vet techs and our nurses to be doing the bulk of the not the hard work because it's all hard work, but the bulk of the work that they can do according to their qualifications. And that goes for the cleaners as well. If you've got cleaners, let the cleaners do the cleaners work as well. So not too much cleaning if you can help it. If you're a nurse, we are resource shy in this instance. So consultations may be needed as well, depending on your scenario. In this instance, think about risk mitigation and can your techs or nurses do some of the lower risk consults. Do be aware that behavioural consults are going to be needed greatly during the recovery period. So liaise with the behaviourists early on. These animals will be experiencing trauma and some even post-traumatic stress disorder. So refer those cases. The key point of this slide is really looking at high and lower level acuity. I can see that we are close to our finish time, so I will speed up just here. A couple more minutes. So send those cases that are higher acuity to tertiary level hospitals like your teaching veterinary hospitals and ensure that the lower acuity cases are going to primary care or out to personnel that are able to and qualified to look after them. Be aware that there are a lot of bodies in disasters and it's really important that we think about how that can impact our people. So do swap that task around. If you're going to be doing rescue, please just note that it is a multi-agency response, particularly with large animal emergency rescue. There's an amazing amount of training going on in Australia at the moment, and well done to those of you that I know have been training hard. Do the course as soon as you can. It's going to help you immensely, and just be aware that we want people working to their strengths and communicating very clearly. You may want to look at the Animal Emergency Incident Management Network. David King is one of our leading rescue specialists in Australia, and Dr. Christine Smith is one of our leading veterinarians, really used to dealing with adrenalized animals that can create a lot of danger very quickly. So, last but certainly not least, let's talk about recovery just in the last minute that we've got left. So, from a recovery point of view, I've introduced ready and respond and recovery as if they're sequential. And yes, when we're planning, they certainly are. But when we're thinking about it from the actual response and recovery active stage, they can all occur at the same time. And so, it can be really helpful to have a planning person who's separate to the actual veterinary response to help you to think ahead and look after that strategic focus and vision for where you're going over the next few weeks, and also just to have an external view to help with that leadership as well. So patients recovering from disasters, my research showed from 2011 that they will take months, some of them up to 2 years, and for humans as well, it's going to take even longer. So we're coming out of the recovery period for the pandemic now. Majority of people have recovered from that, but in some instances, depending on the damage, it's going to last decades. So the key point for this slide, know your triggers to stand down and to deactivate that plan. Liaise with your stakeholders. Local government have the lead recovery role. So at some point, the HMA will hand over to them. Know that Red Cross do reunification for lost people, and that the reunification of animals and people is a little bit of a grey area. We don't have that officially sorted out with any entities yet. Post-incident analysis are a must. You'll get the information that you when you do your debriefing. So collect all of that together and do send it on to the support agency so they can share that with the HMA. And last but certainly not least, ongoing support for your team and your clients. They will be asking for help, and clients will be talking about what's happened as a way of debriefing. And because they know you and you've got a connection with them, please have strong, healthy boundaries as always, and do send them to someone who's qualified to talk with them about this, and show the empathy, and then move them on kindly and kindly and firmly, with compassion, as you always do. The kits, shelter in place kits, evac kits, and treatment kits. That's the key there. Basic training is still happening, still developing this. You can do incident command training already with some RTOs, and stay tuned for the rest. If you'd like to get free training already, even just now after the talk, you can go on to GAD MC on YouTube. There's some recorded talks on there, including two of mine. And I will leave the summary slide up whilst we go to questions. Thank you for letting me go 2 minutes over. I definitely appreciate it.
No, we could listen to you all night, I think, Erica. That was so insightful. Some great links
Uh,
and great recommendations. I will open the floor up. We'd love to hear what questions you have for Erica.
Please. Can see a comment in the chat.
I think that was mine. Rebecca, you've taken.
That's you.
Do you have a question for Erica?
Um, yeah, it's quite basic. I thank you. I know virtually nothing about this area, so this was very good. What's the difference between an emergency animal response team and a veterinary emergency response team?
Good question. The expertise level in terms of qualifications and ability to carry out veterinary treatment per all of the things that we do every day in
Okay.
practice. So the terminology here is really interesting because it's originated from the USA and from Canada. And so in the old days, we would talk about different names for teams. And so some of these have come over to Australia. But what's really interesting is we're trying to align our terminology with what emergency management is using, and also what health is using in terms of human medical response, so that we can fit into the response really well and people know what we're talking about. And so it's not really done and decided yet, but I have certainly landed on veterinary emergency response teams, which is what the AVMA in America is recommending as well. And so I followed their guidance on that. And then when it comes to the assistance response teams, I purposely left off the D or the E before that. So in America, they're called disaster assistance response teams. But everything that we talk about here is aligned with emergencies. It's emergency management, veterinary emergency management. And so I wonder if in the future we may settle on emergency assistance response, emergency animal response teams. Who
Other
knows?
than
The
disaster,
jury's
yep.
still out. So yeah, and there's certainly a move globally. There's a trend towards disaster risk reduction. And because many of our emergencies are going to disasters, we're just seeing more than ever that disaster terminology is certainly coming through. But I think so. Animal Emergency Incident Management Network, that's why they've got that big acronym. They run across Australia and New Zealand. And so we've been working on a document, and it's a work in progress, but working on a document to try and flesh this out and think about what it's going to be. But at the end of the day, in reality, it doesn't matter as long as people really understand what the role is and what that means. And so I think over time we'll settle on something. And you know what academics are like, you can argue about the words and the names for hours. So
Yeah, all right. I wasn't unsure if there was a definition that I missed because I
no, you
arrived just kind
didn't.
of at that point of your talk. I was missed the first bit, so
No, that's okay.
thanks.
And really a poignant thing that you picked up. So thank you for that. It was a really good question.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Anyone else have any questions? We'd love to hear from you. Feel free to pop them in the chat. Or if you're not comfortable speaking on camera, please feel free to shoot me an email at info@vfca.org.au. And there's Erica's details on the screen now. All right. There's no further questions, Erica. We can't thank you enough for your time and that incredible presentation tonight. It was very insightful and extremely enjoyable. So thank you. I'm sure everyone's taken some serious tips, and we always get a huge crowd of people watching the recording that will be up on our website and YouTube channel in the morning. So watch your inbox because it will likely be inundated with a few questions there.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for being here. And thank you for those of you who are watching the recording as well. And always feel welcome to get in touch. I'm happy to answer questions and give you templates for things. They're all ready to go pretty much, or we can tailor it slightly to what you need. So thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks, Erica.
See you later.